Chapter 40. To think that you were this kind of person. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. It was night. The moonlight was cold and clear as it scattered within the vast and boundless dark forest. The bright, silver moonlight added a few traces of silence and comfort to the dark forest. Several crude and simple tents were respectively erected on the soft grass. After experiencing a day's worth of labors, the students were tired, holding murmured conversations or meditating. Han Shuo surreptitiously hid behind a towering tree as he chanted an incantation. A beam of light flashed through thin air as a small skeleton, holding a bone dagger, abruptly materialized. Under Han Shuo's guidance, it flew soundlessly towards the tent Clark was residing in. Clark's tent was pitched a bit of a distance away from the students. Although he appeared humble and genteel on the surface, apart from being friendly and genuine with Fanny, his gaze towards the students held a subtle undercurrent of lofty disdain. His tent was also completely different from other people's and was a distance away by himself. The little skeleton was agile and its inky black form melded with the darkness. It didn't make a single whisper of a sound as it walked, and had arrived at Clark's tent within roughly 10 seconds. The little skeleton slipped inside Clark's tent after Han Shuo's command. A low grunt of pain sounded as Clark's tent spontaneously collapsed. The little skeleton figure abruptly dashed out and it fled quickly to the southwest. After a cry of pain, Clark flew out of his tent in a bedraggled state. He held his long sword in his hand as he gazed around in all four corners, then huffed angrily as it followed in the direction that the little skeleton had taken, muttering strings of low-voiced curses. Success. Han Shuo laughed silently. Han Shuo cackled evilly as he closely followed in Clark's footsteps. Hidden in the shadows, he wove quickly around the corners of the trees. Southwest direction, a spacious pool of water. Strange, curved trees lined the banks. Beneath the light of the bright moon, the clear currents of the pool sparkled with silver color. Continuous splashing sounds along with the sounds of laughter came from the surface of the pool, breathing in a few hints of life into the silent pool. Lisa, have you started developing? Your breasts seem to have changed lately. Hee, Master Fanny, let me tell you something. Swimming can actually enlarge breasts. I only discovered this secret after trying it. Really? Fanny exclaimed in astonishment and then laughed involuntarily. No wonder, I was wondering why you suddenly became infatuated with swimming lately. So this is the reason why. Then we should swim longer today. Master Fanny, your breasts are already so well developed. Why would you still care about this matter? Of course. No woman wouldn't care about this. I see. Apart from swimming, drinking milk, and massaging during showers can all help breasts become firm and perky. This has been my experience. I've been doing this lately and can really feel the changes in my breasts. Master Fanny, you can try too. Lisa, you seem to understand quite a lot now, but your breasts have actually been changing recently. It looks like your methods are effective. But of course. You can't go wrong listening to me. Lisa laughed a light, proud laugh as she spoke to Fanny. At this moment, the sound of footsteps abruptly sounded in the distance. Fanny and Lisa looked at each other and Fanny frowned. What is that noise? Lisa has ducked into the water so that only her head was showing and was equally perplexed. She shook her head and said, I don't know, I discovered this area while I was collected firewood earlier today. No one else should know of this place. Fanny and Lisa were a bit surprised and about to leave and the footsteps grew nearer, and a heavily sweating Clark burst into view along the pool's edge. He looked to and fro, surveying the vicinity. When Clark saw Fanny and Lisa in the pool, all three exclaimed in shock at the same time. Lisa was utterly discomfited and hastily hid her body in the pool, pointing a frantic finger at Clark and speaking angrily, Damn it, how could you commit an act like voyeurism as a noble knight? You're disgusting. No, this isn't what you think. I found this place because I was tracking a monster. Clark was extremely upset and rushed to explain. Leave immediately. Clark, you have disappointed me greatly. To think that you were this kind of person. Fanny also had a wrathful expression as her facial expression and tone turned frosty. Master Fanny, I really didn't mean to come here to peep. Please let me explain. Clark was sweating profusely as he too hadn't thought that he would bump into Fanny and Lisa swimming here. He thought it was a bit odd and hastened to explain. Leave, immediately. Fanny and Lisa gasped and screamed in unison as Clark was hurriedly explaining. A resigned and wry smile on his face, Clark sighed and slightly bowed at the two from afar. He said apologetically, my apologies to you both. I will leave immediately. I hope you don't think that badly of me, I really didn't mean to. Clark had a downcast expression and left with a dejected droop to his shoulders when he finished speaking. A round of complaints flew out of his mouth as he sighed and moaned that his luck was just too bad. Han Shua's surreptitious figure materialized from the shadows of the tree after Clark had left, and he stuck up his middle finger to the figure walking away into the distance. He cackled as he said in a low voice, trying to steal my woman. Go to hell, noble knight. It turns out that noble knights also have disgusting hobbies. Lisa was still infuriated and she snorted slightly with a face full of disdain. Men are all the same, noble knights are like this, lowly errand slaves are also like this. Only some know how to conceal it and others don't. Fanny also snorted lightly and said with some emotion. Errand slaves. Master Fanny, are you talking about Brian? Lisa was startled and then seemed to think of something as she stared at Fanny oddly. No, no. I was just sighing, purely sighing. Heh, Lisa, don't imagine things. Fanny was internally startled that she had spilled the beans, and hastily laughed in embarrassment as a cover-up after Lisa's question. But Lisa's face was still full of suspicion after Fanny's explanation, and her gaze towards Fanny was also a bit strange. She kept murmuring, can it really be Brian? Han Shua had been concealed in the shadow of the trees and watching the two lecherously when he heard their words. His heart jumped, but before he had time to reflect, his eyes suddenly grew wide and his entire being speechless and dumbfounded. Fanny had slowly started walking towards the edge of the pool at this time, and the body that had been obscured within the pool started to slowly emerge. The clear, bright moonlight scattered over Fanny's flawless body. Crystalline drops of water on her pure, white skin were like rolling gems beneath the moonlight, lightly traveling past her satin dot-like body. Her upper body, as revealed beneath the moon's light, was so beautiful that it made Han Shua dizzy. Her breasts were full and upright, with two mesmerizing spots of blush at the peaks. There wasn't an ounce of fat on her tightly toned lower body, and her slender arms were as tender as the snow lotus. A head full of beautiful, light purple locks were scattered messily over her smooth shoulders. She displayed a soul and heart-stealing allure. The rest of her lower body was immersed in the water starting from her lower abdomen, but under the light of the moon, Han Shua could still make out sparkling white legs beneath the clear pool waters. This was the first time that Han Shua had seen a naked girl, and such an extraordinary beauty at that. Fanny's transcendent beauty and perfect figure under the moonlight, with water droplets slowly rolling off of it, caused Han Shua to become utterly gobsmacked. His entire being immediately sank into a sluggish state. A strange sound suddenly traveled into Han Shua's ears, and his dumbly staring self suddenly startled awake and started surveying the area. A loud, panicked scream emitted from Lisa's mouth. Lisa was still in the deep waters of the pond and was pointing fearfully behind her. She screamed hoarsely, Master! Master Fanny, Deepwater Venom Python! Fanny blanked and turned her head to discover a light green, spiked-back ridge, a 5 or 6 meter long enormous python was quickly swimming in from the far reaches of the pool. A savage and merciless light was flashing in the python's dark green eyes, and its heavily fanged mouth spat out dark green smoke as it quickly approached Lisa. Run, Lisa. Hurry and run. Fanny's expression had also changed drastically and she screamed frantically. But Lisa had been terror-struck. Her originally fast-moving figure had slowed down considerably due to the arrival of the deep-water venom python, despite her arms and legs making splashes on the water surface. Master Fanny, wah wah. Save me. Lisa's voice was choked up as she screamed in a panicked frenzy. Her arms and legs moved in unison in a bid to reach the pool banks faster, but the deep-water venom python drew ever closer to her. Damn it, where is that Clark now? Fanny cussed out of character for her, and her perfect body started back, making for Lisa's direction. At this moment, Han Shoa had completely recollected himself and gazed at the deep-water venom python that continued to get closer. He hesitated, and then abruptly dashed out of the tree's shadows. He called loudly, "What's going on?" Deep-water venom python, let me help you." The deep-water venom python was a level 3 magical creature. Not only did its body possess strong attack power, but its mouth could also spit out a poison mist, not to mention its speed and advantages had all been greatly increased because it was still in the water. A level 4 frost eagle could only be brought down with Herculean effort from everyone. This level 3 deep-water venom python would be even harder to handle. Even Han Shoa didn't feel completely confident, but he couldn't just stand by and watch Fanny be eaten. He had to rush out even in the face of death. Damn it, screw it. Han Shoa pulled out a dagger and his body flashed like lightning through the dark forest as he rushed towards the pool of water. Chapter 41. Battling the Deepwater Venom Python. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Within the pool, the Deepwater Venom Python caused huge waves and ripples as it swam towards Lisa with a terrifying aura. It became harder for Lisa to escape the more frenetic she got, and the distance between the two had already shortened to 20 or so meters. Fanny had already reached the banks of the pool when she paid no heed to anything as she splashed through the water, rushing quickly towards Lisa like a mermaid. Han Shoa's speed was even faster. It was like he met no resisting drag in the water as he sped towards Fanny like lightning. All of Han Shoa's bodily functions had far surpassed an ordinary person's since he started practicing magic. When Han Shoa gave it his all, he immediately demonstrated an incredible energy. He had already arrived when Fanny was approaching Lisa. He reached out with both hands without further ado, grabbing Lisa with one and Fanny's waist with the other as he quickly said, "Let's go." He had no time or spare thought to feel the smooth tenderness of Lisa and Fanny's bodies at the moment. His only thought under the panicked circumstances was to quickly vacate the area. His two legs quickly moved through the water like swimming fish. Add to that Fanny's forceful arms and legs, and the three entwined around each other and swam for the banks of the pool, regardless of anything else. Except, if it's only been Han Shoa, he may have really been able to shake off the pursuit from the deepwater venom python. But his speed was greatly affected by the addition of Fanny and Lisa, and it was hard to resume his prior speed. They could only watch as the deepwater venom python grew closer. Lisa's screams and sobs hadn't stopped for a moment. Even Fanny was powerless in this moment, and her face was filled with shock and desperation. In the pool, even summoning dark creatures to do battle wouldn't be much use. The level 3 deepwater venom python had uncommonly thick snake skin. Any ordinary necromancy magic would be unable to stop it. They wouldn't be able to kill the deepwater venom python with one stroke if they stopped to chant a spell, and they were sure to be tangled up by it and then be eaten without a doubt. Wah wah. What to do, what to do? Are we going to be eaten by it? Lisa sobbed frantically as her two hands slapped the surface of the water with decreasing strength. Fanny also didn't know what to do, and could just watch the deepwater venom python approach ever closer. She couldn't find a way to hide or escape and could only swim death-defyingly. A resolute expression appeared on Han Shoa's face after a moment of hesitation. He grabbed Lisa's right arm and swung her out with all his strength. Lisa's naked, charming body shot out from the water and flew 3 meters through the air, straight for the banks of the pool. The left hand that had been wrapped around Fanny's waist suddenly pressed down on her beautiful buttocks. Han Shoa had already pushed out forcefully before she had a chance to scream, and he gave the fast-swimming Fanny a hand. Her speed abruptly picked up as she shot towards to the banks like a spear. "Hurry and go!" Han Shoa roared explosively and quickly turned his head around, facing down the deep-water venom python alone. "Brian, Master Fanny, you have to save Brian." Lisa's desolate cry of astonishment sounded out from afar. "Hurry and go on shore, Lisa. Only then can we help Brian." The look Han Shoa's face was cold and harsh at this point. He tightly clenched the dagger in his hands and could only watch as the deep-water venom python started tangling around him. Surprisingly, Han Shoa didn't retreat, but moved forward instead. He actually dashed out quickly before the deep-water venom python's tail had tangled him, and made for the python's head. Han Shoa knew that as fast as he could swim in the pool, he would still be unable to race against the deep-water venom python. Now that it was tightly against him, wanting to pay attention to nothing else and just seek to escape would be a death sentence. The python's skin and flesh were durable and strong, with soft skin and flesh only around its neck. Close combat was the only way to get out of this alive. The deep-water venom python most likely didn't anticipate Han Shoa would attack rather than run, and so when the enormous tail came to tangle him, it only swung around in a rather large arc but didn't touch Han Shoa. The dark green eyes flashed as the python seemed to jeer at Han Shoa's ignorance. A mist of dark green smoke sprayed out directly towards Han Shoa from its heavily fanged, bloodthirsty mouth as it lifted its neck. "Brian, be careful of the smoke it sprays. The smoke has a slow paralysis toxin and will cause your body to stiffen up, and finally become immobile." Fanny called out loudly at this moment to remind Han Shoa to be careful of the dark green poison mist that the python was spitting out. Han Shoa startled in horrified shock as his quickly moving body held a breath and hastily dived into the waters. He used the pool's clear waters to discern where the python was and rushed in that direction. Avoiding a swing of the python's tail again halfway through, Han Shoa directly traveled to the area beneath the python's neck. Han Shoa's body and the dagger in his hand thrust out through the water at the same time, and the dagger shone with a cold light as it traced a silver line through the moonlit sky, stabbing fiercely towards the soft flesh in the python's neck. The dagger sank up to the hilt with a puncturing sound and blood splurted out afterwards. It was accompanied by a ghastly wail from the deep-water venom python as it twisted its neck. Its enormous body started twisting and turning crazily as well. Han Shoa was taken aback and quickly yanked out the dagger, pressing down his right palm onto its neck. The red flame of the mystical glacial spell fire flashed once and it landed into the python's neck in the blink of an eye. The python became even more berserk after being attacked by the glacial mystical spell fire, and its desolate wails rang continuously. A ball of dark green smoke had started spreading towards Han Shoa before he had time to react. Strands of strange air substance filtered into Han Shoa's body through his pores. He felt his entire body suddenly go weak and numb, and even the dagger became as heavy as 1,000 tons. "Oh my gosh, Brian's been hit by the poison mist. What should we do, Master Fanny, what should we do?" Lisa had already reached the shores of the pool when she saw Han Shoa get sprayed. She called out loudly in great haste. The sound of Fanny chanting a spell suddenly rang out at this time. "Oh endless darkness, turn into destructive bone spears, and destroy according to my will, bone spears." 3 cuttingly sharp bone spears materialized out of thin air and sped, with a whooshing sound, towards the python thrashing madly within the pool. Fanny's bone spear spell was indeed uncommon. The 3 bone spears all hit their target, with 2 of them embedding themselves into the python's forehead, causing 2 flowers of blood to blossom. The last spear landed in the python's mouth, a horrifyingly fanged mouth that had been about to swallow Han Shoa. The spear broke off a few of its sharp teeth, causing the python's enormous mouth to rear backwards. At this moment, the magical yuan within Han Shua's body churned madly, and the sore, numbing feeling vanished immediately without a trace wherever the magical yuan circulated to. Previously leaden and lethargic, Han Shua regained his energy and quickly moved next to the python after its head was rearing from Fanny's bone spears. The dagger in his hand stabbed downwards twice like lightning, and then he swam like the devil was behind him and made for the shore. The deep-water venom python suddenly gave a miserable, mournful roar as it roiled the waters of the pool so that waves and froth formed. When its head appeared again, Fanny and Lisa could see that its two dark green pupils were all leaking viscous, fresh blood. Oh my gosh! Brian can still move, and he's blinded the deep-water venom python. Ahahaha! Lisa was hollering and hopping up on the shore, with the panic and whimpering of the previous second miraculously turning into excited squeals. However, due to the python's wild frenzy, its enormous tail thrashed chaotically and just so happened to whip Han Shua. Han Shua had been moving quickly when his body flew through the air towards the shore after he'd been hit. At the same time, Fanny continuously cast necromancy magic, aiming for the weak spots of the python's beautiful eyes and neck areas. Having lost its vision, the python was hard-pressed to evade Fanny's attacks. The vicious wound on its neck and its eyes were repeatedly pierced by the bone spears and it raised an increasingly loud uproar within the pool. But judging from its appearance, it was steadily losing its strength. Under its berserk frenzy, the python didn't seem to realize that it should escape at this moment, but rather followed the sounds and drew closer to the shore, as if wishing to eat its attackers regardless of all costs. But as its wounds grew bigger, the frenetic deep-water venom python became drained of its vigor and lost its luster. The python finally fell down listlessly, and Han Shua's body slowly floated up to the surface of the water for the first time after he'd fallen in. The clothing around his chest and stomach had ripped apart in many places, and his right cheek was a fiery red. He'd seemed to have been injured by the python's tail whip. Lisa had been shouting excitedly and Fanny had been continuously casting magic when they both exclaimed in shock and abruptly swam towards the center of the pool, paying no heed to the naked state of their bodies. The two moved quickly and hastily pulled Han Shua up onto shore. Han Shua's lower abdomen was distended and his cheeks puffed out with water leaking out the sides of his mouth. It had seemed that he drank quite a bit of the pool. Fanny knew a thing or two about rescue measures and immediately placed both of her slender, jade hands onto Han Shua's chest. She repeated exerted force and compressed downwards, seeking to expel the pool water that Han Shua had swallowed. Lisa did the same and large mouthfuls of pool water were expelled from Han Shua's mouth under their combined efforts. Why isn't Brian waking up yet? Lisa's face was anxious after a while and she looked at Han Shua with worry. Maybe because he's drank too much water, and the area around his throat is already blocked. Why don't you try to breathe for him? Fanny looked at Lisa and made this proposal after a bit of thought. Lisa blushed and glanced at Fanny. Master Fanny, I don't really know how, why don't you do it? Fanny halted for a moment and creased her brow with thought. She grit her teeth with resolution and said, Brian saved our lives. Forget it, I'll try for him. Fanny bent down as soon as she'd finished talking and, her charming cheeks a path of charming, embarrassed red, moved her delicious, red lips towards Han Shua. Han Shua had actually woken up a long time ago and patiently held his peace until this moment. His heart thumping loudly and even feeling Fanny's smooth and tender arms on his chest, Han Shua's heart was mad with glee. A wisp of light fragrance accompanied the creamy sensation, reflecting directly into Han Shua's mind. Fanny's sweet-smelling tongue darted out to separate Han Shua's teeth as the two noses touched and lips locked firmly together. Fanny started helping Han Shua breathe. A marvelous, soul-stealing feeling immediately spread through Han Shua's entire nervous system. Han Shua only felt that this time's adventure had finally been worth the while and was completely unwilling to wake up. He carefully savored this moment of incredibly wondrous sensations. Fanny sucked in one breath, raised her head to expel it, paused and had been about to continue when her clear eyes absent-mindedly took in the strange little tent that had been erected between Han Shua's legs. Fanny was stunned, blanked for a moment and abruptly recollected herself. She gave a high-pitched scream and placed her jade hands around Han Shua's neck, violently shaking him. She cursed loudly, utterly discomfited and exasperated, "Damn it, Brian, I'm going to kill you." Chapter 42. Erected a small tent. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Blurg, Bleck. Han Shua spat out mouthfuls of water as his face turned beet red. He hastily moved Fanny's clenched hands away from neck, still not sure what was going on. He hurriedly said with a wry face, "Master Fanny, what are you doing? I'm already like this. Can't you be more gentle?" Han Shua's eyes suddenly bugged out after saying that, and he stared fixedly at Fanny and Lisa in front of him. Their upper bodies were basically completely naked. The pure, snow-white expanse were revealed entirely. Fanny's beautiful twin peaks and Lisa's initially budding breasts were thus unabashedly utterly exposed to Han Shua's eyes at close quarters. Dripping wet, thin lingerie as thin as cicada's wings covered the two's most vital area on the lower body. Although he was unable to fully see through, the tantalizing, almost translucent temptation was even more fatal. Han Shua's brother had been about to droop down in the shock of being choked, but it now resolutely erected itself again. Brian, you're finally awake. Master Fanny, why are you treating him like this?" Off on the side, Lisa was equally perplexed and she quickly walked over. "Look at his lower body. If he'd really fainted, why would his lower body have a reaction?" Fanny was irate and spoke to Lisa with a reddened face. She immediately retaliated by randomly pinching and twisting Han Shua as she cursed in a low voice. Han Shua was immediately dumbfounded by Fanny's words as his eyes still roved fixedly over the two bodies. Sudden brilliance struck him and he immediately argued, disregarding whether or not his logic was correct. "I was hit by the python's venom just now and my entire body went stiff and listless. My lower body was stiff too. How can this be my fault?" After he'd spoken, Fanny and Lisa looked at each other and suddenly realized that they were still naked. They exclaimed in surprise and screamed shrilly. "Shut up! Stop making excuses. I've never heard of anyone with a stiffened lower body after being hit by the deepwater venom python poison mist. Ooh, close your eyes and don't you dare peek. Lisa, let's hurry and put our clothes back on before we deal with him." Fanny humphed angrily and hurriedly vacated the scene, screaming along with Lisa. Han Shua immediately shut his mouth and his beady eyes quickly opened when both had turned their backs to rove greedily over Fanny's well-rounded and pert bottom. After a moment, a fully dressed Fanny and Lisa walked furiously over from the distance with both of their cheeks burning red. Fanny sized up Han Shua with a darkened face, snorting coldly after a while, "Why did you appear here so coincidentally?" "I came to collect firewood and happened to hear your screams. That's why I appeared here to save you without paying attention to anything else. Master Fanny, I'm hurt and I didn't mean to look at you guys. I'm stiff all over and can't move. The python's tail also whipped me from my chest to my right cheek and it hurts an incredible amount right now. This was all to save you too." Han Shua said with a pinched face as he lay there on his back, his entire body as stiff as a wooden doll with only his mouth and pair of eyes being able to move. "Master Fanny, although Brian is indeed suspicious, but he's just saved our lives and become like this because of that. Can you let him go?" Lisa looked at Han Shua from afar and flung him a vicious eye roll when she saw that his lower body was still firmly stiff. She spat lightly and only then begged for mercy on his behalf. "Lisa, I've been violated by him." Fanny glared at Han Shua and spoke hurriedly when she saw that Lisa was begging for leniency for him. "We're the only ones that know of this. I won't say anything, Brian certainly won't say anything, so you can just pretend that nothing happened. He's also seen my body. Although I hate him too, we can't very well kill him. He almost lost his life because of us just now. Lisa blanked for a moment and finally responded to Fanny Riley after thinking for a moment. I didn't see anything just now, I promise. Master Fanny, please don't kill me. Han Shua's face was full of panic as his eyes moved rapidly, spitting out a string of crazy talk from his mouth. Shut up! Fanny shouted irately. This expression was replaced by resignation, and she abruptly stomped her foot after thinking for a while. She gritted her teeth, this isn't over yet. You're injured, so I'll let you go for now, but I'll settle this with you sooner or later. We have finished addressing last time's matter when you've... Nothing. Fanny suddenly realized that she'd almost let things slip halfway through. Seeing that Lisa was looking at her with a look of suspicion, she hurriedly changed the topic to cover up her slip. Master Fanny, you don't mean... Lisa looked at Fanny oddly and asked. No, Fanny immediately huffily interrupted Lisa's words, and then laughed charmingly and said gently, Brian kept making mischief in last time's experiment, that's why I said I'll settle last time's matter with him. Don't think the wrong thoughts. Isn't this right, Brian? His eyes moving rapidly, Han Shua hastened to agree, yes, that's right. Lisa, you watch Brian for now. The deepwater venom python is already dead, I'm going to go extract the core from it. This is a level 3 magical creature core. We'll be able to walk and talk proudly when we return. Fanny was a bit afraid to continue to remain here, afraid that she would let something slip again. She hurriedly walked away like she was escaping something. She swam into the lake again, but this time she didn't undress. After Fanny had left, Lisa approached Han Shua and sighed lightly, saying lowly, Brian, who would have thought that you would be so silly? I know that your death-defying battle with the python this time was all for me. I only half believed your words in the trap, but now after this event, I believe you completely. Brian, I'm actually a bad girl and not worth your effort. Han Shua. Lisa saw Han Shua stand there dumbfounded and thought that she had correctly guessed Han Shua's inner thoughts. She shook her head and clenched her teeth, Brian, give up on me while it's still early. We're really not suited for each other because the gap between our status and position is simply too great. My family would never approve a relationship between us. I'm sorry, Brian. Han Shua. Brian, what's wrong, why aren't you talking? Are you sad? Lisa maintained a knowing look on her face as she spoke frantically and continued to think that she was being a heartless person. Han Shua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. As he watched Lisa continue to pay no attention to anything other than herself and carry on speaking those conceited words, he really didn't know how to respond. He finally settled for being in a daze for a while and then shouting in pain, stop talking. After he paused, Han saw that Lisa had been severely frightened. He hastily sighed and spoke with a face of desolation, I understand in my heart. I just wish to look at you from afar and won't bring you any troubles. Liking someone means that one shouldn't weigh her down and should wholeheartedly consider all matters for her. Lisa, you don't have to mind, really. I will take care of myself and silently wish you the best. Han Shua had heard these words from a third-rate soap opera before, and he even gave himself goosebumps upon saying them. He thought he was really being a bit too sinister and shameless. I've never heard anyone say such nice things, wah wah. I'm sorry, Brian. Contrary to Han Shua's expectations, Lisa actually burst out in low sobs after she heard his words. Her tears flowed down without pause. It had seemed that she'd been greatly moved to pieces by his words. Fanny returned, dripping wet, from the pool at this time. When she heard Lisa crying, Fanny's face changed as she glared viciously at Han Shua. She said, Brian, haven't you bullied us enough? Wah wah. Master Fanny, it has nothing to do with Brian. I was just a bit scared after recalling what had happened just now. It had nothing to do with him, really. Lisa hastily wiped away her tears, forced a smile onto her face, and explained when she heard Fanny berate Han Shuo. Looking at Lisa in confusion, and then looking at Han Shuo, who hadn't moved an inch and was still lying there completely frozen, Fanny snorted lightly and said, "He wouldn't dare bully you anymore." Fanny's clothes were tightly plastered to her perfect body as she'd emerged from the lake. Although nothing could be seen, those vivacious curves were still a feast for Han Shuo's eyes. He tooted in appreciation inwardly. Fanny not only possessed beautiful and striking features, but her body was a crime of utmost temptation. This is a bit odd, the deep-water venom python was burnt to a soggy mess from its neck to its head. I wonder what happened. It looks like this python died so quickly, not because of my magic, but because of the burnt mess within its head, which is weird because my bone magic doesn't have the amazing effect of making someone's body burned up from the inside. What is going on, Brian? Fanny sized up Han Shuo and asked oddly. Laughing dryly, Han Shuo said hastily, "Who knows? I only stabbed it a few times and don't have the kind of magic or fighting aura for it to burn up from inside. It's no use looking at me." Is that really the case? Why do I think you're very suspicious? Fanny frowned and her beautiful eyes sized up Han Shuo as she spoke with a voice thick with suspicion. Whatever you want to think. I'd love to have such wonderful magic and fighting aura though, but too bad I just don't have the strength. Han Shuo laughed loudly and said with a bit of a self-deprecating tone. The magic that he was practicing was something that shouldn't exist in this world. This was a secret that he would never tell anyone else, even under pain of death. Master Fanny, you must be thinking too much or saw incorrectly. Your eyes don't work too well sometimes. Brian just saved us, so why would he lie to us? Besides, if he was so strong, he would have long since stopped being an errand slave. Perhaps. Fanny smiled slightly, nodded her head and then said gleefully. I've got the magical creature core. Come, we can go back to the tents now. This swim was quite thrilling, but we made out like bandits by getting our hands on a level 3 core. Brian, can you move now? Do you want me to get some of the male students to carry you back? Lisa looked at Han Shuo and asked with some worry. According to my knowledge, the poison mist of the deep-water venom python only temporarily paralyzes enemies in order to facilitate eating them later. It's been so long. Brian, you should be fine by now. Fanny huffed angrily and rolled her eyes at Han Shuo in a bad temper, speaking with a cold expression. Han Shuo exclaimed in surprise upon hearing her words. Ah, that's so true. I can move fully now. Let's hurry and go back. Lisa started, then looked at Han Shuo and also spoke with a bit of anger. Brian, you could move a long time ago, right? Han Shuo spoke seriously without a trace of awkwardness. No, I only knew I could move after I heard Master Fanny's words. Let's go. Let's go. They'll be worried if we're any later. He abruptly stood up after speaking without waiting for Fanny and Lisa's responses. He walked speedily and headed straight to where the students had pitched their tents. Damn it, he's definitely been pretending all along. I found out by just testing him. Brian, stop right there. You haven't heard the end of this. Fanny was infuriated and she chased after Han Shuo, pulling Lisa along in her wake. Chapter 43. Reborn. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Han Shuo whizzed all the way back and suddenly detected that Jean hadn't gone to bed yet when he returned to the campground. He was sitting outside his tent instead, bored to death. Brian. Have you seen Fanny or Lisa? Jean immediately stood up and asked when he heard Han Shuo's footsteps. Nodding, Han Shuo said faintly, I did. Master Fanny and Lisa will be back shortly. Master Jean, why haven't you gone to sleep yet? Oh, because Clark suddenly left for some business. He asked me to give Fanny his apologies. That Clark left without giving a reason. How baffling. Han Shua's thoughts raced after hearing Jean's words, and he immediately understood that Clark must have left abruptly because he knew that he would be unable to explain his actions for bumping into and angering Fanny and Lisa at the pool. I see. Master Jean, I still need to collect a few things from nearby. When Master Fanny and Lisa return, please tell them that I'll return at daybreak. Han Shua quickly headed south after he'd spoken, not paying attention to whether Jean had agreed to pass along his message or not. He vanished without a trace in the blink of an eye. Although Han Shua's body wasn't stiff and drained of energy, he was still feeling the effects of the python's tail whip. His body was truly injured, and he knew that Fanny and Lisa were bound to nag him for a while when they returned. This way, he'd be unable to use his magical yuan to repair his body. He therefore decided to temporarily avoid the situation and wait until morning. Their tempers would mostly be mollified by then, and there shouldn't be anything major by that time. There was a towering tree to the south with a thick branch heavily forested with twigs and leaves about 10 meters from the ground. Han Shua sat down Indian style and was deep in concentration, coalescing the magical yuan to repeatedly strengthen his body. Time flew by unknowingly, and the slight aches in Han Shua's body faded away beneath the circulation of the magical yuan. Every inch of skin, flesh, tendon, and bone in his body felt like it was filled with surging strength. Han Shua had sank into the passive demonic mental state when a faint sliver of pain started emanating from his mind and gradually spread throughout his entire body. A sudden onslaught of pain accompanied it, as an agony 10 times stronger than that pain roared to life and caused Han Shua to immediately cry out. Explosive Polypola sounds rang out from within his body accompanying his pain-filled roars. Faint, murky strands of air started rising from Han Shua's pores along with these sounds, and layers of ripples swam along the surface of his body, as if someone had thrown a rock into water. When his pores had finished emitting the murky air and harmful matter within his body, a misty cloud of black splendor faintly surrounded his body. This situation sustained for who knew how long. Han Shua only felt the pain all over his body suddenly vanished without a trace, and he dropped down from the 10-meter-high branch with a sharp crack. His body was scarily agile and nimble. Success. He had finally successfully broken through the first demonic, solid, realm. From now on, his body had been reborn. Whether it was strength, pliability, or toughness, his body now far outstripped that of ordinary people. After surpassing the most basic, solid, realm, Han Shua's effort in future training would be halved, but would be double in effectiveness. A sudden thought struck him and his magical yuan circulated freely, meeting no obstructions. Not only could it effortlessly travel throughout his 4 limbs, chest, and stomach, but the magical yuan could also easily circulate to his head. Han Shua glanced at his naked skin and saw that not even a single scar remained from his previously scar-covered body. His skin and flesh were clean and supple, and he could clearly feel that his height had increased another 1 or 2 centimeters when he moved his body. He lifted his head to look at the sky and saw that it was still deep night. Han Shua was reveling in the joy of new life in the moment as he continuously circulated the magical yuan all over his body, excitedly feeling out every inch of change. Suddenly, Han Shua's mind raced as he remembered the handbag and jade box he carried around with him. Last time he'd used the bizarre object within the jade box to mediate and train his mental strength, he had almost had all his mental strength sucked away instead. It was only when the magical yuan had flowed into his brain that he had found a way out of danger and emerged with great rewards instead. To no end now that he had broken through the solid realm, Han Shua could freely deploy the magical yuan at his will and command it to flow to any part of his body, including the most difficult to reach part, his brain. Recalling the enormous rewards that he'd gained previously, Han Shua found it hard to repress the desires in his heart. He immediately sat down, crossing his legs, and took out the bag he always kept on him. When he opened the box, the ball that appeared like an eyeball was still as strange and sinister as he remembered. When he focused his mental strength and slowly started coalescing it into the round ball, the same thing that occurred last time happened again. The ball instantly emitted a hazy light green aura, and the drop of blood inside gave one a heavy, uncomfortable feeling. Han Shua's mental strength was sucked away like a whale drinking in water, and it flowed quickly into the round ball within the jade box. The pain in Han Shua's mind increased as his mental strength continued to be siphoned away. Finally, just when he thought that his mind would explode, his thoughts moved and the magical yuan pooling in his lower abdomen suddenly flew up into his mind. There was a loud roaring sound in his mind as increased pain caused him to roar out loudly in pain. At the same time, his surging mental strength returned with the force of leveling mountains and draining seas, instantly filling Han Shua's mind. Han Shua abruptly sank bonelessly to the ground and panted heavily. His entire mind felt groggy and stuffy, and this condition maintained itself for a while. He slowly returned to normal and only felt that his mental strength had indeed increased significantly. Han Shua stared involuntarily at the round ball with glee. Suddenly, Han Shua saw that strands of green light had started rippling through the ball. These strands of light wove together continuously, as if a pen was tracing out a drawing. A picture formed in the midst after a short while, a strange, grey castle. Briefly revealed by the green lines, it suddenly vanished without a trace, leaving only the drop of red in the center flashed continuously as it actually formed the shape of a red arrow. It froze momentarily, then pointed south. What did this mean? What did it mean when the arrow pointed south? Han Shua was momentarily dumbfounded as he gazed at the spot of red in the center, lost in thought. His thoughts churned madly and finally confirmed one thing. The red arrow within the round ball had delineated a direction, like an objective to travel to. He hesitated and gazed at the sky as his curiosity had been thoroughly piqued. He finally grabbed the jade box and quickly ventured south, in the direction that the jade box was pointing at. Throughout this entire process, Han Shua could feel that the further south he traveled, the more he heard sounds from large magical creatures. Dangers abounded along his way and he was quite wary. His eyes occasionally flicked to the round ball and noticed that the arrow continuously changed direction, as if pointing out the correct path for Han Shua. He proceeded in this way for quite a while when the red arrow in the round ball he grasped finally disappeared. The red blood-like drop reappeared, and the green light emitted from the ball became stronger. Strong magical pulses traveled out from the ball. Han Shua stopped, surveyed his surroundings and realized that this was a common area filled with weeds, shrubbery and towering trees. An unknown, enormous tree with twisted, entwined branches was present not too far off, and its strange shadow, illuminated by moonlight, appeared like that of a monstrous creature on the ground. Han Shua concentrated his attention and suddenly noticed something strange. In other parts of the dark forest, sounds from bugs would carry on no matter how quiet it was, but upon reaching this place, Han Shua realized that this place was almost desolately quiet. There wasn't a single insect's call and not a hint of life to be found. Bizarre. Han Shua felt that the entire area was filled with a strange aura, hidden under an ordinary exterior. This aura felt familiar and friendly to Han Shua, as if he'd long since grown used to some things, but upon thinking carefully, Han Shua realized that he had no idea what was going on. Just as Han Shua was completely lost and deep in thought, the round ball within the jade box suddenly levitated into the air as the ball used the green light on the surface to draw beams of magical lines through the air. Han Shua could feel the strong magical pulses through the air, and that they were growing stronger the more the ball's green light shone out. After Han Shua had noticed, he suddenly realized that the area bathed in the green light underwent changes that made his eyes bug out and his tongue tied. The weeds and shrubs on the ground would suddenly vanish without a trace whenever the green light touched it, to change into dry, gray, and dusty earth with piles of stark, white bones piled on it. The leafy bowed, towering trees on the side also underwent eerie changes under the green light, changing into the skeletons of monstrous, dead creatures. If Han Shua's memory served him right, those enormous skeletons were the legendary bone dragons, the most terrifying kind of dark creature. Death. An empty, desolate wilderness morphed into an eternal land of death under the rays of the green light. There was an enormous grey castle half floating in air, half buried underground. A few odd, sharp spikes encircled the castle as numerous pictures of dark creatures were carved on the castle walls. Han Shuo looked on for a while, completely gobsmacked. He finally muttered to himself in astonishment. Is this the legendary Cemetery of Death? Chapter 44. Cemetery of Death. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The Cemetery of Death was a legendary, sacred ground for necromancers, and the lofty hope that the band had held upon traveling to the dark forest. Han Shuo fully observed his surroundings, connecting it to Fanny's previous descriptions. He could be certain that this was the legendary Cemetery of Death. No wonder Han Shuo had vaguely felt something so familiar about this place earlier. This was because Han Shuo also practiced necromancy magic. The strong pulses of death magic in this area, including the smell given off by the illusioned white bones, were all things that Han Shuo were exceedingly familiar with. He gazed all over his surroundings, taking everything in. Han Shuo frowned as he thought, everyone who has ever seen the Cemetery of Death has ended up dead. Now that I stand here, do I go in or not? The Cemetery of Death was a place in which mighty necromancers studied necromancy, back when this magic was at its peak. All the necromancers had later died, and the Cemetery of Death had vanished without a trace. However, since this Cemetery of Death had been a place of research for those necromancers, some secrets of necromancy must surely exist here. This was a huge temptation for a rookie like Han Shuo, someone who had just entered the halls of magic. This forced Han Shuo to seriously consider whether or not to take on this adventure. After a while, Han Shuo walked towards the direction of the cemetery and set foot into the piles of stark white bones, a firm resolution evident on his face. When he'd taken a few steps forward and set foot into the inner parts of this area, the dark green, round ball hung high in the air suddenly landed back into the jade box, and the green light that bathed the surroundings vanished with a trace. Han Shuo started as he looked around him, stunned. The outskirts, that his eyes had just passed over, had changed again. It had been restored to the site that he had first seen when he had arrived. Only the surroundings areas around the cemetery to the ground underneath Han Shuo's feet were the same scene of death and gloom. Looking at the round ball in his hand, Han Shuo understood that this ball was a pivotal item to enter the Cemetery of Death. It seemed to be able to open the doors to the cemetery. The entire cemetery was shrouded by a concealing field. No one would be able to detect anything out of the ordinary if they looked in from the outside, nor would this place elicit anyone's attention. However, one would be able to reveal the true nature of the Cemetery of Death with this round ball and envelop the entire cemetery under a veil of silence and desolation. The stark white bones creaked beneath his feet. The sound suddenly broke through the still and lonely air, giving Han Shuo the creeps. It was a good thing that he had just successfully broken through the solid realm, giving him some courage from who knew where. He actually walked headlong towards the Cemetery of Death without paying heed to anything else. After a while, he finally stood in front of the cemetery. There was a circular moat in front of the door and inky black water flowing in it. A bridge made of black lines and white bones hung in abject loneliness over the moat. Without hesitating, Han Shuo's hands tightened around the jade box that held the ball and stepped slightly apprehensively onto the bone bridge, slowly walking towards the doors to the Cemetery of Death. The bridge swayed, throwing his body off balance. He didn't know what was in the moat below, but a single glance was enough to raise his hair. He somehow felt that whatever was in the still, inky black waters of the moat was highly dangerous. When Han Shuo walked onto the bridge, the round ball within the jade box started emitting the strange green light again. This seemed to be some miraculous medicine for motion sickness as the wobbly bridge stopped swaying as soon as the green light flashed out. The black lines that had once been large gaps in the bridge immediately solidly bridged the space between the bones. Han Shuo finally made it to the door. There were skeletons of two enormous evil knights and their steeds in front of the two great, grey doors that were made of unknown material. Evil knights were dark creatures that possessed extremely strong battle power. Necromancers who weren't at Archmage level shouldn't even entertain the idea of summoning evil knights. From the large skeletons of the two evil knights in front of the doors and the shape of their battle steeds, Han Shuo could vaguely tell that these two evil knights were the cream of the crop. There were complicated and detailed magical patterns on the two grey doors. A round slot was present in the center, where the two doors intersected. The shape of that slot looked like a key that would open the doors. At this moment, the dark green ball that Han Shuo clutched in his hand suddenly shot out a beam of green light, aiming straight for the round slot in the middle of the doors. Han Shuo's thoughts raced as he immediately understood what was going on. He raised the jade box without hesitation and brought the ball closer to the slot, slowly inserting it. In the entire process, Han Shuo took pains to ensure that his hand wouldn't touch the round ball, because he understood that this ball was no simple object. He wasn't sure if some undesired changes would occur if skin and flesh touched it, so he therefore avoided touching it with his bare hands as much as possible. When the ball had been inserted into the slot, a roar sounded out as the doors abruptly opened with a creak. The slot automatically split open with the opening of the doors, and the round ball that had been inserted in it remained in the jade box with no changes. Hazy gloom and dust from the inside drifted out, accompanying the opening of the doors, causing Han Shuo to cough a few times before calming himself down and observing what was inside. There was a large hall within the Cemetery of Death and 6 rooms with closed doors around the hall. The entire hall was quite vast and the ceiling was extremely high. It was about the size of a basketball field, and there was a magical matrix in the shape of a large, 6-pointed star in the center. It was about 80% to 90% similar to the one that Han Shuo had taken from the academy to the city of Zajowski, and there were ancient, quaint magical pictures drawn in the center. Apart from the 6-pointed star matrix, the hall was bereft of anything else. There were only a few magical pillars that were supporting the building, and a few broken pieces of bone in the corner. There was a thick scent of decay in the air and Han Shuo waited for a while at the door, only slowly walking in when he felt that the scent had slowly started dispersing through the open doors. Apart from the 6-pointed star matrix, there was only the lofty ceiling within the hall, plus the 6 room doors that the matrix points were pointing at. He first looked throughout the hall and didn't come up with anything valuable. Han Shuo then turned his attention to the 6 rooms with the closed doors. 1, 2, 3. Han Shuo was still empty-handed after having gone through all 6 rooms. From the shape of the 6 rooms, they were merely 6 warehouses with nothing inside them now. He returned to the great hall and started recollecting what Fanny had said last time. Apart from the general outward appearance, Han Shuo gradually remembered that only a small portion of the Cemetery of Death was revealed above ground. Most of it was buried deep underground, and the true secret would surely lie in the depths of the cemetery. Except, Han Shuo hadn't seen any tunnels or stairs leading down after he'd gone through the great hall and 6 rooms. This greatly befuddled him and he sank into deep thought again. After a while, Han Shuo still felt that the round ball within his hands was the key. He immediately stood up again and circled the hall again, including the 6 rooms in his inspection. Finally, Han Shuo discovered another slot in the corner of one of the rooms. He was overjoyed and another set of rumblings sounded out when he inserted the round ball into the slot. A dark tunnel suddenly split open the walls of the room, and rows of 6 silver sticks, made from strange material that was neither stone or wood, were laid on the first step of the tunnel. There seemed to be connection points on both ends of each stick, as if the 6 sticks could be assembled. There was only a thin piece of paper apart from the 6 sticks. On it, ancient magical symbols were used to write a few hastily scribbled words. Han Shuo took the thin sheet of paper. When he'd carefully read the magical words, Han Shuo understood that these 6 sticks could form a diagram with a 6-sided star and be used in direct transportation with the magical matrix in the hall. He also clearly understood that if one had insufficient mental strength, one would be unable to venture further into the depths. Apart from that, Han Shuo was unable to obtain any other useful information from the thin sheet of paper. Thinking briefly, Han Shuo put away the 6 magical sticks and creased his brow as he started walking down the tunnel. An invisible field suddenly appeared as green light rippled, abruptly bouncing him off. Han Shuo only felt that his mind hurt abnormally throughout the process, and internally reflected that the words on this thin sheet of paper were true. His mental strength must be too weak and was being prevented from descending any further into the depths of the building. Cursing lowly, Han Shuo stayed in the room and connected the 6 magical sticks according to the instructions recorded on the paper and formed a 6-pointed star on the floor. He then stood in the center of this mini matrix, activated it with his mental strength, and Han Shuo appeared in the large matrix in the center of the hall with a flash of white light. Repeating the same method, Han Shuo infused the transportation matrix in the hall with his mental strength and returned to the same room after activation, appearing within the small, 6-pointed matrix. His brow creasing in deep thought, Han Shuo understood that he would be unable to enter the tunnel and explore the cemetery of death for the time being. It was a good thing that he had gained the 6 magical sticks and the round ball that allowed him to conveniently come here no matter where he was. This filled his heart with glee as he'd already started thinking of this place as his secret base. Since he would be temporarily unable to discover the secrets of this place, Han Shuo had no desire to continue to stay. After thinking for a while, he rolled up the 6 magical sticks and placed them on his back, put away the piece of paper into his pocket, and walked out of the cemetery of death in the same manner of holding the jade box. When Han Shuo had safely walked out, he looked back and realized that the scene was the same as when he'd walked in. The growth of tall weeds, shrubs, and towering trees remained unchanged. His surroundings were still quietly desolate. A small, satisfied smile appeared on his face. Han Shuo understood that this time's outing to the dark forest had come to an end here. He had stumbled upon the legendary cemetery of death by pure, dumb luck. The secrets of this cemetery also belonged to him and no one else, including the necromancy students and teachers. Chapter 45. Making a move when he should make one. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. After emerging from the cemetery of death, Han Shuo returned along his original path, but the sky had completely brightened halfway on his journey back. When he returned back to the original camping grounds, according to the way in his memory, he found that the necromancy students had long since moved on. Just as Han Shuo was about to curse loudly, he suddenly took in the appearance of his surroundings. He discovered that the ashes in the area with the bonfire didn't look like they were from last night, but much more like they had been there for a few days. Han Shuo's tent area had been filled with many resources, but now nothing remained. Only a few rocks were piled up in a triangular formation. His interest piqued, Han Shuo quickly walked to the tent area. He took out his dagger and carefully flipped through the center of the stones, retrieving a piece of yellow paper after a while. Brian, on the 2nd day of your departure, we found traces of the 2 man-eating monsters nearby. We were worried that the man-eating monsters would seek revenge and decided not to wait for you. When you see this note, return to the academy along the original way. Perhaps we will meet halfway. Hope you are safe and sound, Fanny. Fanny had left the note. Han Shuo whapped his head after reading it and silently said, "Oh no." After reading the note, Han Shuo understood that much time must have unknowingly passed by while he was practicing magic, and not merely just a day. It looks like the 2 man-eating monsters had appeared and caused Fanny and the others to panic. Add to that she was already deep in the southern territory of the dark forest and without Clark's protection, they had no choice but to resign themselves to return along their original path. Currently, Han Shuo's slave status still had not been resolved, and the woman he wanted was still within the Babylon Academy of School and Magic, along with some tomes of necromancy magic that he still wanted to learn. He would be unable to leave the academy in the near future. With the 6 magical sticks, Han Shuo could come and go from the cemetery of death at his leisure. He could absolutely use the transportation matrix to make the cemetery his personal territory after he returned to the academy. The entire southern portion of the dark forest would be his training fields in the future. Whether it was magical yuan or magic spell training, half the amount would lead to double the effectiveness in a place like this. Musing for a while, Han Shuo followed the instructions left on Fanny's note and followed the original road, swiftly moving towards the outskirts of the dark forest. Although he traveled without rest for a day, Han Shuo actually didn't feel tired at all. Moving through the winding and bumpy paths of the dark forest, Han Shuo's speed was as fast as lightning, like a magical creature hunting down its prey. He neared an area of randomly scattered rocks and shrubs around dusk. This was an area where they had camped before. The sounds of metallic clashes traveled to him from afar. Han Shuo was startled, thinking, could it be that Fanny and everyone else are under attack by the man-eating monsters? When he thought of this, his speed picked up and he abruptly flew towards the area of rocks and shrubs. Along the way, many forest trolls with glistening green skin, towering bodies, grimacing faces, and wielded knives or studded clubs repeatedly attacked Han Shuo. He easily evaded all of them. Forest trolls were a race within the dark forest that were mortal enemies with the elves. The elves treated them as marauders of the forest and continuously attacked them. Within the dark forest, the forest trolls were even more frightening robbers than the man-eating monsters. Not only did they adhere to a strict code of conduct, but they also divided themselves according to methods employed by mankind into warriors, hunters, and even priests that could use some simple magics. It was said that the forest trolls were evolved from plants and trees. They held high intelligence, similar to humans, and enjoyed some unique advantages within the dark forest. They leveraged these advantages to wantonly plunder the resources of other races, including the cargo of some traveling merchants. They were infamous bandits and robbers like the man-eating monsters. Han Shuo listened closely to the sounds of fighting and quickly darted in the direction they came from. Along the way, some of the forest troll hunters threw out long spears, and they flew towards Han Shuo's spine with a whooshing sound. Han Shuo's 5 senses were exceedingly sensitive as he ran. As his ears twitched, he changed the direction of his body a few times and easily evaded the long spears that had been thrown. Several forest troll warriors holding large, sharp axes yelled loudly as they rushed towards Han Shuo, but before they had reached him, Han Shuo had already agilely dashed past them and continued towards the center of the action. After 10 or so seconds of extremely fast sprinting, Han Shuo had finally made it to the thick of combat. He saw 10 or so people wielding longswords, defending themselves against the forest troll attacks. Their dress clearly signified them as part of a mercenary band. They all looked like they had suffered some sort of injury. Benoel de them there were about 10 or so forest trolls surrounding them. Troll warriors handled the close combat up in the front, while about 10 troll hunters continuously threw out long spears. The final 5 troll priests cast simple healing magics and fire of the soul to enhance body durability, healing the warriors and hunters' injuries while increasing their vitality. Judging from this scene, the fight had been going on for a while. The battle strength of the band of roughly 10 humans was also extraordinary, but it was a pity that the forest trolls held the strength in numbers, and they had missile fighters in the form of the troll hunters, as well as the healing type troll priests. The combination of these 3 matched up against a mercenary band of only warriors. Add to that the forest trolls' advantage in strength, it was obvious that they held the absolute advantage. A short, stocky fatty, with a face full of blubber, was behind the mercenaries. His yellow bean-like little eyes moved swiftly as he cursed loudly. He seemed to be searching for a way out. So it wasn't Fanny and them. Looks like this is nothing to do with me. Han Shuo thought as he immediately put the events of this tableau out of his mind. He had no thoughts of joining the fray and helping, and was intent on simply bypassing these people and continue on his path to exit the dark forest. However, even though Han Shuo had no intention of lending a helping hand, these forest trolls didn't seem to want to let him go. A couple particularly strong and fierce troll warriors, who were out in the front, had already raised their large battle-axes and were rushing towards Han Shuo. A few sharp spears in flight also accompanied them. "Sorry, I'm just passing by and will leave immediately. Continue robbing them. It's nothing to do with me." Han Shuo didn't want new complications to arise, so when he saw the troll warriors rush towards him, he yelled loudly and tried to leave and avoid them. Humans are the most devious and evil of all races. Kill him. Standing beside the troll priests on the outside, the forest troll leader of this operation suddenly screamed harshly with the common language of humans, of the continent. The troll warriors had paused briefly upon hearing Han Shuo's words, but lost their hesitation when hearing their leader's words and came rushing over with axes upraised. Damn it! They were looking for death. Han Shuo was also a bit hacked off. He had just evaded the throws of the long spears when the tall, bulky troll warriors rushed over with their battle-axes. They were obviously planning on also taking care of him along with the others. Wrapping his hand around a long spear beside him, Han Shuo pulled upwards and grasped the spear in his hand. He didn't wait for the forest troll warriors to get closer before he jumped upwards. The spear in his hand was so fast that it was like lightning piercing through the air. The spear first pierced through the chest of a troll warrior and also strung up the warrior that was close behind it. The two troll warriors only had time to emit two ghastly screams before they died instantly when the spear impaled them. Han Shuo randomly grabbed one of the battle-axes that one of them had wielded and yelled loudly, "Can't blame me if you come looking for your own deaths." After the matter with the man-eating monsters last time, Han Shuo was no longer timid, or did he waste time hesitating when it came to killing someone. He also somehow felt vaguely excited. Han Shuo knew that mercy or pleas would be absolutely useless with these bandits and robbers. Only cold and cruel methods would be able to shock and awe them. The more timid and cowardly you were, the more they would act without reservation. Therefore, Han Shuo had acted extremely cruelly just now, directly using violent killings to face them. Indeed, after Han Shuo had displayed his brutal methods, panicked expressions appeared on the glistening green skin of the other four forest trolls that had followed their brethren's charge. They retreated quite a few steps backwards in cowardice. Even the leader of the forest trolls looked at him with some horror, and an apprehensive expression appeared on his face. "Brave warrior, please rescue me." At this moment, the short fatty, that the mercenaries shoved to the back for protection, suddenly cried out with excitement. He looked at Han Shuo with a fervorous expression, as if Han Shuo was his savior. "No interest." Han Shuo replied decisively. He picked up the battle-axe with a cold snort and prepared to leave. The short fatty immediately lost his calm and cried out wildly upon seeing that Han Shuo was about to leave. "Brave warrior, I am willing to pay you a rich reward if you save me. I promise that you'll be satisfied." Han Shuo had already taken a few steps forward when he heard those words. He suddenly stopped and turned with a faint smile, looking at the fatty. He said, "Noble sir, how large of a reward are you willing to give?" The fatty was momentarily stunned, then hesitated. He grit his teeth and stamped his foot, yelling loudly. 50 gold. Sorry, please find someone else. Han Shuo thought that if it had been before, he probably would have been tempted by the 50 golds. Now that he'd entered the dark forest and discovered that his skills were absolutely enough for him to catch windblade wolves by himself, he no longer felt that 50 gold was enough for him to take the risk. Fatty grew anxious seeing that Han Shuo was about to leave. He yelled out again. 70 at most. Han Shuo continued walking forward without even looking back. 80, 100, 120, 150. 200, 200. The moving figure abruptly stopped. Han Shuo suddenly looked back and rushed speedily back. He said, "All right, 200 it is then. I'll eat up the loss and count it as making a friend. Oh my word. 200 golds. You're robbing me just like they are. 200 gold is enough for more than 10 slaves. Damn it, get me out of here. Fatty hollered with a look of pain on his face. Chapter 46. Little Skeleton acts violently. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When Han Shoa had moved behind the fatty, he discovered that out of the 10 or so mercs defending the fatty, the strongest of them were 2 mid-ranked warriors, followed by 6 novice warriors and a few other warrior apprentices. All of them were covered with wounds, and the 2 strongest mid-ranked warriors were injured the most heavily to the point where they had almost lost the ability to fight. Master Fabian, we're the ones who are supposed to protect you. The mid-ranked warrior with blood still bubbling out of a bloody hole in his rib cage grew agitated as he saw Han Shoa quickly draw near. The situation now is quite apparent that you have lost the ability to fight and cannot offer me effective protection. I paid half of the gold to your mercenary band earlier, but because you were unable to escort me back to the Empire, I will not be paying the second half. Fabian said with a face full of resignation and then pasted a warm, slight smile on his face. He bowed slightly and said to Han Shoa, "Mighty warrior, please take me away from here and I will pay you 200 gold. Alright, give me 100 gold first and I'll start immediately." Han Shoa was at ease and also responded with a slight smile. At this moment, upon seeing that Han Shoa did not seem to be leaving, the forest troll leader finally screamed with violent rage, "Devious and evil humans, kill them all." When the leader's words sounded, the troll warriors, hunters, and priests that had been standing blankly in their places called out in the weird language of the forest trolls and rushed over in large strides. "Alright, this is 100 golds. When you safely take me away from here, I'll give you the other 100 gold. Damn it, they're coming for us, make your move." Fabian hastily took out a money bag and poured out 100 gold coins for Han Shoa when he saw that the forest trolls were rushing over with ugly expressions and wielding weapons. Having received the 100 gold coins, Han Shoa suddenly smiled at Fabian. Before Fabian had a chance to react, Han Shoa had swung Fabian onto his back and ripped out a few tattered pieces of gauze from an open pocket. He firmly tied Fabian onto his back without further ado. "Let's go, I'll get you safely away from here. You must hold on tight, if you fall off halfway, you only have yourself to blame." Han Shoa hurriedly instructed as he threw away the battle axe in his hand, grabbed a new long spear from beside him and abruptly dashed towards the perimeter. 7 troll warriors had long since blocked the way, with a few other hunters and priests behind them. They had already thrown out their long spears and javelins with whooshing sounds when they saw that Han Shoa was rushing towards them. Even with a fatty on his back, Han Shoa still navigated the rough and windy paths with ease. He agilely changed direction and easily evaded several long spears and javelins. When Han Shoa had rushed to the side of the 7 troll warriors, the long-awaiting troll warriors rushed towards him, carrying their battle axes. He clenched the long spear in his hand tightly as Han Shoa rapidly closed the distance, and the spear stabbed towards the chest of the first troll. A blood-red flower suddenly blossomed on his chest, and the troll warrior fell directly backwards after he shuddered. At this moment, the troll priest towards the back started singing healing and fire of the soul magics. A few beams of green light descended onto the troll warriors. The troll warrior who had fallen shakily got back to his feet. When the other troll warriors had been enveloped by the magic of the fire of the soul, it was as if a layer of metallic skin had been applied to their already tough green skin. Their skin shone with a metallic gleam, followed by simultaneous increases in speed and strength. They rushed at the 2 with loud wails. "Hurry! Hurry and get me out of here!" Fabian was frightened out of his wits and started screaming in a panic on Han Shoa's back. His expression unchanged, Han Shoa ignored Fabian's calls and yells. He abruptly threw out the spear in his hand and impaled the troll warrior, that had just unsteadily clambered to its feet, through the neck and nailed it to the floor. He then pulled out the spears and javelins stuck on the ground and threw them, one by one, towards the priests hiding the back. One of the priests didn't dodge in time and was immediately pierced to death. Another 2 troll hunters also died due to being impaled from the front. At this moment, Han Shuo randomly pulled out a long spear and started to directly confront the troll warrior in front of him. Having had the fire of the soul cast on it, all of the troll warrior's bodily functions had increased significantly. However, Han Shuo's current condition had had some small achievements in practicing magic, and the toughness and flexibility of his body still far outstripped them. He maneuvered the long spear and flicked out the battle axes one by one. Throughout this process, when the battle axes had been sent flying from the troll warrior's hands, they would pull out a javelin or long spear from the ground at the same time, thoroughly blocking the way and entangling Han Shuo. He was up against 6 with a fatty on his back. Even though he dodged with high speed, he still wasn't able to fully avoid all the injuries. Whenever danger approached him, Han Shuo would very evilly use Fabian on his back as a shield, using the latter's fat, stocky body to decrease the damage inflicted on his own body. Damn it, you can't do this, otherwise don't even expect receive the 100 gold coins after. Fabian's butt had been poked by a long spear, and his back had been bloodied by a few javelins. He wailed in continuous complaints on Han Shuo's back. Unfortunately, Han Shuo completely ignored all of Fabian's complaints. He conveniently pulled a long spear embedded in the chest of a troll warrior, and the resulting spray of flesh blood fully splattered all over Han Shuo. Han Shuo's expression had been cold and vicious to begin with, and he looked even more like the reincarnation of a bloodthirsty god with all the blood over him. This momentarily shocked Fabian senseless, and he didn't dare speak further nonsense, merely whimpered and cried on Han Shuo's back. Kill him, rush him together. The forest troll leader suddenly exploded into an irate roar upon seeing that Han Shuo had killed quite a few forest trolls. He even pulled out a battle axe from behind him and rushed over. Currently, although Han Shuo wasn't particularly breaking a sweat facing off against 5 trolls, it was still exceedingly difficult for him to break through. When the troll leader had finished speaking, even more forest troll warriors rushed over. Han Shuo dodged the crushing blow from a battle axe and backed up a few steps. Souls of the fallen soldiers, heed the Dark Herald's call and reveal your existence. Han Shuo spread out his hands and suddenly chanted the spell used for a necromancy summons. Oh, my gosh! You're also a mage. Fabian had been sobbing in a low voice when he was momentarily shocked by Han Shuo starting an incantation. He looked blankly at Han Shuo with an odd expression and called out weirdly. Lo! The forest troll leader off in the distance was startled and then increased its speed, screaming loudly, "Kill him, hurry up and kill him." A small skeleton that wielded a bone dagger suddenly materialized in front of Han Shuo. Its small, thin body stood there in solitude as its empty eye sockets patrolled the area a bit at a loss. Ah, come on, just one little skeleton, and such a thin, small one. What use is it? Fabian started wailing with surprise when he saw that Han Shuo had summoned just one skeleton. Wahahaha, so it was just one skeleton. That scared me. Kill them all. Upon seeing that it was just one skeleton after being shocked, the forest troll leader immediately jeered loudly and directed the troll warriors to quickly approach. Han Shuo's 2 eyes were cold as a trace of a mocking smile also made its way to his lips. When the forest troll leader had spoken, he immediately gave the order for the little skeleton to attack. When the little skeleton received the command to attack, its small leg bones bent down and then extended, suddenly flying out like a sharp sword. The bone dagger in its hand drew a line of black light through the empty air as it flew out first. The first troll warrior, that came rushing up, was directly pierced through its forehead like cutting paper, and it fell straight down backwards. The little bone dagger didn't stop after running through the head of the first troll warrior. It whistled through the air according to the little skeleton's motions, just like a ghost out for blood. Ear-deafening whistling sounds accompanied secretive and unpredictable curves as it ran through 2 more troll warriors with another stroke. When the little skeleton drew close to the troll warriors, the dagger returned automatically back into the little skeleton's hands. The mere loosening of the bone dagger had instantaneously taken the lives of 3 troll warriors. The previously exceedingly disappointed Fabian and loudly jeering troll leader were both dumbfounded after the little skeleton's single strike. They stared closely with a face of incredulity at the little skeleton. It was like a tiger that had entered a flock of sheep. The little bone dagger that was grasped tightly in its hand began to nimbly reap the lives of the troll warriors. Oh my goodness! Am I seeing things? Is that really only just one skeletal warrior? Fabian had finally recollected his wits and began to shout excitedly. If it wasn't for the gauze that had completely wrapped around him, he might have even fallen off and landed on the ground in his excitement. Don't get close to him, everyone stay away from the skeleton and use long spears, javelins, and battle-axes to kill that skeleton. After the troll leader had recovered from its shock, it issued loud commands with a look of fear. Its originally advancing body stopped in its tracks as it began to back up in cowardice. The troll warriors, that had been close to the little skeleton, had all retreated. When they had left, long spears, javelins, and even the troll warriors' battle-axes filled the air and descended upon the little skeleton. Han Shuo was startled. As strong as the little skeleton was, it would most likely be hit under such a strong barrage of attacks, but he wouldn't be able to recall it in time even if he started the incantation now. Han Shuo grew anxious and started truly worrying for the little skeleton. Except, the little skeleton's succeeding fancy, incredible performance completely upended Han Shuo's understanding and knowledge of it. Chapter 47. The Horror of 7 Bone Spurs. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. At this moment, the 7 bone spurs on the back of the little skeleton suddenly waved in the air with a creaking sound. When the barrage of javelins, long spears, and battle axes were about to land on the little skeleton, the 7 bone spurs instantaneously detached themselves from the little skeleton's spine and whirled into the air, dancing in an interweaving pattern in front of the little skeleton and above its head with great whooshing sounds. The little skeleton held its ground, wielding the bone knife, and its little body capered madly, as if it was having an epileptic fit. The 7 bone spurs drew mysterious curves through the air, as if manipulated into a dance by invisible hands according to the little skeleton's will. Continuous cracks rang out as the flying javelins, spears, and battle axes were all struck down and broken by the interweaving 7 bone spears. Not a single one made it near the little skeleton's body. Han Shuo pinched his own waist and only knew this moment was truly real after he felt pain radiating from his side. Not only could the little skeleton manipulate the bone dagger and face off against enemies, but it could even activate the 7 bone spurs on its back and make them form such a frightening weapon. This made Han Shuo feel that in this moment, the little skeleton was really quite incredible. The law of activating magic was a law that activated magical treasures to attack. The last time Han Shuo had bafflingly transmitted those memories to the little skeleton, TL note. Chapter 27, he had seen the little skeleton immediately activate the bone dagger in a flying dance. This was already enough to astonish Han Shuo, but now that the little skeleton could even activate the 7 bone spurs on its back, this thoroughly flabbergasted Han Shuo. In order to activate the law of activating magic, other than an understanding of the law, a magical treasure, that was tied with the caster's life and shared one mind with the caster, was also needed in order to call upon the law naturally. It looks like that, unbeknownst to anyone, the 7 bone spurs and bone dagger had become the little skeleton's magical treasures under the constant reforging from the magical yuan. Han Shuo didn't have a magical treasure at hand and thus couldn't activate the law of activating magic, but who would have thought that a dark creature, a little skeleton, was walking ahead of Han Shuo and had been the first to successfully activate it. Oh my gosh! What kind of monster is this little skeleton? Fabian gave an excited and high-strung moan, exclaiming in a low voice while being tongue-tied and with eyes bugging out. After the flying javelins, long spears, and battle-axes had all been demolished, the forest trolls were also completely shocked. Following that, the 7-bone spurs, that had been circling the little skeleton's body, abruptly flew in all directions and pierced through the bodies of the 7 forest trolls that were standing there in a stupor. Demon, this is a demon within a skeleton's body. Run! An extremely panicked and horror-filled scream rang out from one of the forest trolls' mouth. It was as if this was a signal to retreat, as all the forest trolls started fleeing for their lives in various directions, like lost dogs. Even the forest troll leader had no more crap to say as it ran heedlessly in a sprint for escape. A situation's development was always so out of expectations. Han Shuo had only planned on breaking out and escaping from here and hadn't reckoned on the fact that the little skeleton's 7-bone spurs would be equipped with such scary power. When Han Shuo had recovered himself, the surroundings were littered with more than 10 forest troll corpses and there were no longer any living forest trolls. Ha ha ha, good boy, good boy. Han Shuo suddenly had an exceedingly proud feeling and couldn't stop from laughing wildly. At the same time, the 7-bone spurs whirled in a circle in thin air and then accurately landed back on the little skeleton's spine. The little skeleton stood up straight afterwards, with bone dagger in hand, and started searching the forest troll corpses with practiced motions. It took everything on the bodies, except for the clothes. Give it to me, the other 100 gold coins. Han Shuo smiled lightly as he let Fabian down from his body and asked for the remaining payment from a Fabian that was still shocked silly. At this moment, Fabian's eyes were still patrolling over the little skeleton's body. He only came back to himself when Han Shuo's voice sounded. Just as Fabian was about to bring out the gold coins, he suddenly thought of something and glared at Han Shuo. No, you dared to use me as a shield when fighting with the forest trolls just now. Your actions have completely harmed the position of the employer. How dare you think of the other 100 gold coins? His face suddenly stilling with a cold look, Han Shuo's frigid gaze roved over Fabian's body. He randomly plucked a javelin from the ground and asked lightly, Mr. Fabian, are you trying to cheat me? On the other side, the little skeleton, that had been collecting the spoils of war, suddenly stopped as well, its empty sockets looking at Fabian. Coldness suddenly emanated throughout Fabian's body as his heart gave a shudder. He reluctantly squeezed out a smiling face and took a few timid steps backwards, saying, joking, it was just a joke. Heh, here's 100 gold coins and not a single one short. You've done great work. Han Shuo lightly hummed as he put the 100 gold coins away without further blather. A feeling of carefree enjoyment rose in his heart as he thought powerful strength is never unfavorable. Noble warrior, the items on the forest trolls. Mine, all mine. Han Shuo abruptly cut off his words before Fabian had a chance to finish, factly presuming that all those items were his spoils of war. Squeezing out a forced laugh, Fabian continued, of course they're all yours. I mean to say that I can purchase the items you've gleaned off the forest trolls. His brow furrowed, Han Shuo looked suspiciously at Fabian and a smile made its way to his face. Han Shuo mimicked Clark and bowed urbanely, does Mr. Fabian mean to say that he plans on buying these items from me by means of gold coins? That face changes swiftly. Fabian cursed inwardly, pasting the same smile on his face and nodded. Indeed, I am a merchant and venture in and out of the dark forest to purchase items found within, then bringing them back to the Empire for profits. As infamous robbers within the dark forest, the forest trolls should have some of what I need. If you don't mind, I plan to buy them off you. At this moment, the little skeleton walked silently over to stand beside Han Shuo with 8 handbags hanging off his hands. Under Han Shuo's orders, the little skeleton put the 8 bags down and used the bone dagger in hand to flip them open one by one. Han Shuo also took out the treasures he'd gleaned during this trip and put them on the ground, awaiting Fabian's appraisal. 8 level 5 magical creature cores, 6 level 4 and 1 level 3. 3 complete windblade wolf pelts, 3 fangs from the venom lizards, 1 egg from the deepwater venom python, and 5 blades of moon-eating grass. I can give you 1,000 gold for all of this together, what do you say? Fabian appraised the items silently after he had categorized them all and lifted his head to smile at Han Shuo. Shaking his head, Han Shuo said with an odd air. That's nothing. The deepwater venom python is a level 3 magical creature. Its egg alone should be worth a great deal, not to mention the core of a level 3 magical creature. You offer only 1,000 gold coins. Do you take me for an idiot? Han Shuo knew that the price for a level 3 magical creature would naturally not be too low, but he didn't clearly quantify how many gold coins, because he was unsure of the actual price. However, it was a given that merchants would always offer a price far below market price, so Han Shuo naturally wouldn't let him have the items so easily. The deepwater venom python is a level 3 magical creature, but the rate of success for raising a deepwater venom python from an egg is pathetically low, and it's not a guarantee that it will identify someone as its master. Therefore, the price can't be too high. How about this? I offer 1,500 gold coins, what do you say? Han Shuo said nothing and only looked at Fabian with a slight smile. 2,000 gold coins, this is my final offer. If you're unwilling to sell then forget it, I'll leave. Fabian grit his teeth and finally raised his own price up another 500 gold coins. Seeing as this was about the limit, Han Shuo smiled lightly and said faintly, 2,000 it is. The items are yours, but what about the gold coins? These items would surely be worth more than this in the Empire, but Han Shuo was still in the dark forest and without a space ring, it would be inconvenient to take these things with him. In addition, Han Shuo's status was just an errand slave in the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force, it would be difficult for him to dispose of the items in the Empire. It would be easier and more convenient to directly hand them over to Fabian. This is a crystal card with 2,000 gold coins saved in it. You can take this crystal card to any savings firm and exchange it for gold coins. Oh right, what's your name? I can print your name into the crystal card for you. Fabian took out a thin card made from golden-colored crystals and asked Han Shuo. Brian. Oh, okay Brian. Fabian took out another thin, needle-like item after taking out the crystal card and slightly drew it over a thin slot in the corner of the crystal card. A faint, golden light winked and the crystal card went back to normal. Han Shuo had arrived at this world for a while and after purposefully getting to know this world, understood that a crystal card functioned like an ATM card in his original world. Gold, silver and bronze coins were all tangible items with heft to them. No one could possibly carry thousands or tens of thousands of gold coins on themselves. These crystal cards were a necessity for nobles. Crystal cards could be used at will in the omnipresent savings firms to save or withdraw gold coins. Here, Brian, this crystal card is yours from now on. Fabian gave the crystal card to Han Shuo and smiled, looking at him. I'm called Fabian, a member of the Empire's Boost Merchant Guild. You can come find me at the guild if you ever have anything to sell in the future. This is my address, put it away carefully. The Boost Merchant Guild was one of the biggest merchant guilds in the Empire. Controlled by the Boost family, even Han Shuo, who didn't get much in the way of rumors and news, had heard about the wondrous resources of the Boost Merchant Guild. Listening to Fabian's words, Han Shuo immediately carefully put away the crystal card and smiled, Mr. Fabian, nice to meet you. Perhaps I really will have something to bother you with in the future. The forest trolls won't dare disturb you now, and our matter is concluded. Goodbye. Han Shuo didn't say much after those words and he gave the little skeleton an order. One man and one skeleton quickly vanished off into the distance. Hello brave mercenaries. I think our business can continue to be conducted. Fabian called out to the mercenaries who were looking after their wounds and walked towards them upon seeing Han Shuo suddenly leave. Chapter 48. The Allure of Gold Coins. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. After departing from Fabian, Han Shuo's path took him straight to the outskirts of the dark forest. He took paths that their group had all taken before. During his journey, Han Shuo continued to practice magic. Having gone through the reforging of the solid realm, it was as if Han Shuo had been reborn. Now that his magical training had bore fruit, the magical yuan could travel to all parts of his body according to his will. There were 9 levels in the world of demonic magic, and Han Shuo had now reached the open passages realm. The training for the open passages and solid realms differed slightly. This was a realm that primarily focused on the expansion of the body's meridians, greatly increasing the width and durability of the meridians. In every instance of training, the process of opening passages filled his body with splitting agony, as if there were insects biting and gnawing within the meridians. The first 3 levels of demonic magic of solid, open passages, and molded spirit were the most foundational realms. Training became increasingly difficult as one progressed, but with the experience of training in the solid realm, Han Shuo already understood that agony and inhumane torture accompanied his magical training. The inhumane pain of the open passages realm was also within his expectations. He used magical yuan to repeatedly expand his meridians without letting up for a second, basing it purely on indomitable will. After 12 days of training and traveling, Han Shuo still hadn't run into Fanny and the others along the way. He finally made it out of the dark forest alone and made it to the town of Droll again when dusk fell. Compared to a month ago, Han Shuo had weathered through the trials of the dark forest, and since then his strength, mindset, and appearance had all undergone drastic changes. Han Shuo was now over 170 centimeters, and although his body wasn't too muscular, he was no longer thin and scrawny. After baptism by fresh blood, Han Shuo had greatly improved both his pluck and knowledge. His entire aura was also undergoing mysterious changes. He was slowly changing under circumstances that even Han Shuo himself wasn't even aware of. At dusk, the town of Droll was enclosed in a happy, carefree atmosphere. Many adventurers had returned from the dark forest. Some wore expressions of sorrow, having lost companions, while others had satisfied smiles on their faces due to obtaining rich rewards, and they planned on a thorough night of depravity within the town of Droll. When it was dusk, Han Shuo first came to the place where Jean and the others had borrowed and stabled their battle steeds. He observed the place from a distance and noticed that the battle steeds that they had spent money to borrow were still present. He immediately understood that Fanny and everyone else probably hadn't returned to Droll yet. Although they had spent money on the battle steeds, the necromancy teachers and students only had the rights to use them. When they returned to Zajoski, they would have to return the battle steeds to the Zajoski guards in precisely the same condition that they had received them. Since the battle steeds were still here, that meant Fanny and them had definitely yet to leave. Han Shuo naturally knew that traveling with such haste by himself, he was sure to return much more quickly than Fanny's slowly plodding group. Perhaps Fanny and the others had been delayed by magical creatures along the way, so it was within his expectations that Fanny and the others hadn't returned yet. He went to the small hotel that everyone had stayed in previously, walked to the main counter, and said with a smile, "I need a room." The owner was eating fruit with his eyes almost shut. He raised his head to flick a glance at Han Shuo and said lazily, "Oh, it's you. Give me 10 bronze coins. That warehouse is always empty. You can go there now." The last time Han Shuo had come with the others, Jean had especially rented out a warehouse for Han Shuo, and Han Shuo had been scorned by the owner because of this. Therefore, when the owner saw that it was Han Shuo, he naturally assumed that with Han Shuo's status, he could only rent the warehouse. He didn't become angry, but rather smiled and took out the money bag at his waist. He clinked and poured out 1 gold coin from it, dumping it onto the round wooden table. He looked sideways at the owner and said, "I don't want to stay in the warehouse." The owner had been lazing about when he suddenly sat up, swiping the gold coin off the round table. A professional smile swiftly pasted itself to his face and he raised his voice, "Of course, of course. How would a warehouse be worthy of 1 gold coin? Cute little fellow, tell me whatever kind of room you want to stay in. A gold coin will be more than enough." His treatment was drastically different from last times with the presence of gold coins. Han Shuo smiled faintly and nodded, I want the room the female teacher was in last time. Arrange it for me. No problem, not a problem at all. This is the key. 1 gold coin is enough for up to 5 nights there. Do you have any other desires, young man? The owner asked further with a toadying expression. The owner's face was wreathed in smiles as he merrily took out a key from a drawer behind him and handed it to Han Shuo. Nothing else, just go about your own business. Han Shuo walked directly towards the room that Fanny had occupied before after receiving the key, thinking that money had the same miraculous power no matter what world one was in. It would seem that in order to gain one's footing in this world, gold coins were a requisite item. Han Shuo unloaded his belongings after arriving at the room Fanny had stayed in before, leisurely taking a hot bath in the tub. Recalling the pleasant affair that had taken here last time, Han Shuo felt a burst of flames erupt from him and his lower body bore certain uncontrollable, strong signs. Cursing in a low tone, Han Shuo stood up naked and grabbed a towel from the side to dry his body off. Just as he was about to leave the bathroom, he caught a glimpse of his athletic, sculptured body in a wide mirror that had been off to the side. Han Shuo's body in the mirror displayed bulging muscles all over his body and a fit figure. The sun had turned his skin copper-colored during this time, and he looked exceedingly healthy and full of masculine energy, a marked difference from his previous waif-like, thin self. He squeezed his 2 chest muscles with satisfaction. They were neither too big, nor too small, and he struck some poses in front of the mirror. Han Shuo pointed at his reflection in the mirror with quite some narcissism, laughing as he complimented, little fellow, looking good eh? Han Shuo came to a clothing vendor after he left the hotel and spent 1 gold coin to purchase a soft, high-quality undergarment, wearing it inside the errand boy uniform that the academy had handed out. He then came to a weapons vendor and spent 10 gold coins to purchase a higher quality dagger, 4 gold coins for 15 sharp steel needles and hid them in his pant legs, and another 6 gold coins to purchase a miniature crossbow to hide in his sleeve, fully arming himself. Afterwards, Han Shuo went to a pharmacist and took out 40 gold coins to buy a few solutions and powders. Apart from a few simple medicinal supplies, tranquilizing and psychedelic aphrodisiacs were also part of the mix, as well as a bottle of poison. These items were prohibited within the empire's city of Zhajoski. Even if Han Shuo had the money, he didn't have the means to procure them, but in the town of Droll, open trade was allowed because adventurers needed them. Since Han Shuo had come here with money in hand and now that he understood the importance of strength, he naturally bought some in case they would be needed later. After he had bought all these items, Han Shuo finally sighed and thought that it was good to have money. He felt that even his spine was more upright than normal after walking out of the pharmacist. Everything became so much easier when there were gold coins in his money bag. On the way to the hotel, Han Shuo's stomach roiled as he looked at the hotels decked out in colorful lights. He followed his body's needs and ducked into one of the hotels. The din was loud and deafening within the hotel and neon lights flashed randomly on the roof. Adventurers and merchants had formed small groups and had congregated on the tables and chairs within the hall, loudly chattering about their adventures. These people's faces were flushed red and they held wine glasses in their hands, drunkenly calling out and conversing without any reservations. Delicacies were placed everywhere on the tables and a few young male and female waiters continuously threaded the throng, serving them more fragrant wine and dishes. Han Shuo made a beeline for the only empty table in the corner of the hall and sat down. A shy young waiter quickly walked in front of Han Shuo afterwards and asked politely, "Excuse me, what would you like?" "Good wine, good meats, give me some of both of them." Han Shuo fished out 1 gold coin and flicked it into the waiter's serving platter with his thumb, commanding loudly as he opened his mouth. When the server saw the gold coin land, his eyes immediately brightened and he immediately bowed even more respectfully. He put away the coin without a change in expression and smiled with a gentle voice, "Yes sir, please wait just a moment, it will be up right away." One should enjoy themselves when they had wealth to spend. Han Shuo lazily lounged against the chair and sized up the various adventurers and merchants in the hall with slitted eyes. Some of these had possibly just returned from the Dark Forest, or were about to enter to Dark Forest. Some of them had just escaped from danger, whereas others were planning on heading into unknown perils. They were all releasing their energy in great waves, enjoying the depravity of the town of Droll to their heart's content. After a while, the shy server placed a bottle of light purple wine, 3 large platters of meat, and 2 bowls of fruit on Han Shuo's table. This is Purple Leilon, the most renowned wine in the town of Droll. Adventurers all love drinking this, I hope you will be satisfied with it. The waiter pointed at the bottle of light purple wine and introduced it after placing everything on the table. He then bowed and retreated. Han Shuo couldn't wait and grabbed a piece of meat and started tearing away at it. Although it didn't taste as good as the ones he prepared, it was still quite good. He twisted the top off the wine bottle and gulped down a large mouthful of Purple Leilon. The luscious sweetness also embodied a certain fire to it, and a mellow aftertaste was left in the mouth after it had traveled down to the stomach, bringing another kind of enjoyment to Han Shuo. Good wine indeed, Han Shuo complimented. When he raised his head to look around, he suddenly saw 2 familiar figures walk in the door, Claude and Irene. Claude and Irene scanned the area, searching for an empty seat. Both started when their gazes landed on Han Shuo, after which they actually started walking towards Han Shuo in pure coincidence. Chapter 49. A Belated Revenge. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Isn't this the Necromancy Major's errand boy? Claude asked with a frown as he'd made his way to stand next to Han Shuo. Necromancy errand boy Brian. Who would have thought that we'd bump into each other here? Han Shuo nodded, gulped down another mouthful of Purple Leilon, and smiled in response. There seems to be no seats left. Claude, why don't we switch to another place for dinner? Irene raked a gaze over Han Shuo with a trace of disdain in her eyes. No need, at this moment, most of the hotels in Droll must be packed with people. There's only Brian at this table. Since we're all from the academy, I'm sure Brian wouldn't mind if we sat down with him, would you Brian? Claude said to Irene with a smile and then stared merrily at Han Shuo. Of course I don't mind. If you don't feel that sitting with an errand boy like myself detracts from your dignity, I'll gladly share a table with you too. Claude had injured his little skeleton in the past in order to appease Irene. Perhaps Claude had long since forgotten about this matter, but Han Shuo had silently remembered it. Now that his strength had increased, Han Shuo had lost more and more reservations when taking action. He'd been fretting that he had lost his chance to enact revenge on Claude, but who knew that he'd come knocking on Han Shuo's doorstep. Han Shuo was naturally loath to let this opportunity pass by. I hate everyone from the Necromancy Major, even errand slaves are without exception. Irene creased her brow, flicked a look at Claude and spoke coldly. Claude started, then threw a meaningful glance at Irene. He smiled and said to Han Shuo, Brian, aren't you with the rest of the Necromancy Major? How come we don't see any sign of them and you're here by yourself? Oh, come to think of it, you, an errand boy, would be able to enjoy such a rich feast of food and wine. How surprising. Irene also looked at Han Shuo with surprise upon hearing Claude's words. She seemed to particularly mind about Claude's questions and was in no hurry to leave at this point. When Claude saw that Irene had displayed an expression that indicated her interest, he eagerly wiped off the dust on the seat in front of her. She finally sat down unhurriedly after he had indicated that she should sit. L.rg Han Shuo ripped apart the grilled meat in his hand and sent it into his stomach completely as if nothing had happened. He belched in satisfaction after another mouthful of wine, rubbed his stomach in self-satisfaction and said with a smile, Master Fanny and the others should be back soon. They were afraid that I would be a burden and so gave me a few gold coins for me to wait here for them. Are there any problems? No. So that's the situation. Right. Brian, how was your haul this time? Any high-level magical creatures? Claude winked at Irene and asked Han Shuo with a smile. Irene revealed an expression of interest and likewise stared intently at Han Shuo, seeming to suddenly care quite a bit about the necromancy major's haul. Shaking his head, Han Shuo said, "I don't know," I returned halfway. "I don't know if they had any major gains, but I think their haul this time wouldn't be too small." "Ha! Those people. What kind of haul could they get?" "They could at most hunt down some level 5 magical creatures, and likely find it hard to kill even a level 4. Irene looked at Han Shuo contemptuously and snorted coldly. Han Shu only faintly flicked a glance at Irene in the face of her jeering and didn't say much. At this moment, Claude had already hailed the waiter and also used 1 gold coin to arrange for some wine and meat. Han Shuo inwardly took stock of the situation, wondering how to take his revenge on Claude. After thinking for a while, an involuntary trace of a wicked smile appeared on his lips. He calmly and subtly took something similar to a banana peel from the plate in front of him and threw it underneath his foot. When a fast-walking waiter carrying a plate appeared, Han Shuo pushed out with the toes of his right foot and sent the fruit peel abruptly flying out from beneath the table. The waiter was setting a fast pace with plates in hand when he set 1 foot on the fruit pool, stumbled with an exclamation of surprise and fell forwards. The plate in his hand flew out and hurtled towards Claude and Irene from behind. Claude and Irene reacted upon hearing the commotion and suddenly turned around. Claude's right hand abruptly rose and deftly caught the plate crashing towards them. At the same time, Han Shuo's left hand flashed out like lightning and with a flick of his pinky finger, the gray-white psychedelic aphrodisiac landed quietly in Claude's wine glass. "Be careful when you walk." At this moment, Claude's brow was furrowed as his right hand handed over the plate he'd caught to the waiter, who had stood up once again. His voice was displeased. "Thank you, noble knight. I will be careful in the future." The waiter fearfully took the plate from Claude and quickly left after a bow. Han Shuo was composed and collected. His head was lowered as he lifted his glass, drinking wine as if nothing had happened, like he hadn't noticed what had just happened. Claude and Irene didn't say much to Han Shuo afterwards. Claude fawningly talked with Irene, putting away glass after glass of purple Leylon with psychedelic aphrodisiac mixed in. Irene's expressions were cool, responding to Claude on and off. It looked like she had yet to accept Claude's love. "You guys take your time. I still have some matters to attend to and will be heading off now." Han Shuo knew with certainty that the psychedelic aphrodisiac powder had been absorbed by Claude when he drained down several glasses of purple Leylon. He immediately stood up and dropped this sentence. Claude and Irene were originally derisive of Han Shuo to begin with. They'd absolutely paid no heed to him and wished devoutly that Han Shuo would leave, as opposed to being an irritating sight in front of them. They waved their hands in unison after Han Shuo's words, indicating that Han Shuo should have left earlier if possible. After a bit of time, they no longer concealed the scorn on their faces. Leaving the hotel with a smile, Han Shuo stood alone in an undetectable street corner beside the hotel. After a while, a hotly flushed Claude and a slightly pink-cheeked Irene walked out side by side, heading for the north side of Droll. The sky was dark by now and the festivities of the town of Droll had reached their peak of the day. Adventurers formed in groups of 3 or 5 staggered drunkenly, loudly down the streets. Han Shuo followed the two noiselessly, and stood by the side of the street, waiting for a good show upon seeing the two of them enter a luxurious hotel. According to Han Shuo's observations just now, it seemed that Claude had yet to move Irene's heart. If at this moment, under the influence of the psychedelic aphrodisiac, Claude did anything that exceed boundaries, he was sure to be severely beaten by Irene. Fruit in hand, Han Shuo ate leisurely and thought wickedly. No disturbances had come from the hotel after a while. Just when Han Shuo was beginning to lose his patience, the hotly flushed Clark suddenly walked out from the hotel and walked onto the streets with great haste. Han Shuo's thoughts moved. He hadn't thought that Claude's willpower would be so strong, that he hadn't fully lost all rational thought by now, but judging from Claude's appearance, Han Shuo knew that he wouldn't be able to hold out for much longer, and he quickly caught up to Claude, following him from afar. Indeed, he'd only made it about 10 or so meters when Claude slightly lost control after a wave from a heavily made-up, scantily clad older woman. He panted heavily as he made for the alley, looking like he would resolve his biological needs at close proximity. Wasn't that Claude? An exclamation sounded from the adjacent street. Han Shuo swiveled his head to sudden joy, inwardly exclaiming, "Even the heavens are helping me." The light major teacher, Beecher, and a few light major students happened to be passing by. One of the female students with particularly sharp eyes just so happened to see Claude and the coy, revealing woman dart into the alley and had cried out in astonishment. "No way, how could Claude be that kind of person? He is a noble knight and wouldn't demean himself in places like this. Not to mention that Claude is pursuing Irene right now, so there is no way that he'd do so." Beecher frowned and said in unconvinced confusion. "It really was him, I'm sure I didn't see him properly. If you don't believe me, we can go inside and check." The female student, who had spoken first, thought for a moment, and then said decisively. "Come Katie, it's none of your business here. Don't go poking your nose where it doesn't belong." Beecher was silent for a moment, and then hurried the students to leave quickly. Katie looked angrily at the alley and stomped her foot after a moment's thought. "How can this be allowed? I'm going to tell Irene. If Claude isn't in his room, then it must be him. I will absolutely not allow Claude to defraud Irene's feelings." Katie left in a fast, huffy pace as soon as she'd finished talking, making a beeline for the hotel that Irene was staying at. The other light major students looked askance at each other when she left, not knowing what to do. Han Shuo almost couldn't hold his raucous laughter in. Who would have thought that things would work out like this? Han Shuo had been planning on doing things himself and think of a scheme to lure Irene here. Who knew that Claude was really so unlucky? Looks like it would be difficult for him to avoid bad luck today even if he tried. After a while, an Irene with a frigid expression and a huffy Katie walked swiftly from afar. One look at Irene's expression was enough to know that she was feeling incredibly wrathful. Claude would find it tough to get out of this one. Claude was indeed not in the hotel. Looks like I didn't see incorrectly. That must have been him just now. Irene, I think if we should go in now we'll be able to catch him in the act. How could he commit such despicable acts as a noble knight? Claude is too disgusting. Katie looked angrily at the alley after she'd arrived. Irene nodded with an icy face, wasting not a moment more with talk, and grabbed Katie in a rush to the alley. Beecher and the others were afraid that a messy situation would develop and followed after a moment's hesitation. When they'd all gone in, Han Shuo unhurriedly made his way into the alleyway with a sinister face dressed in an evil smile.